through a controlled API, to achieve correctness and security, you happen also to get this bonus of optimal performance.
Nice.
And that's the way to look at it. And as far as web scale is concerned, well, that's the operation on the data in the tables, and it's agnostic at that stage to how you get it done, whether it's parallelized or all that stuff. That's not the domain of discourse of PL SQL.
Cool, appreciate it. So yeah, so you're having a talk tomorrow. People can go into more detail with you.
Yes, you don't need to know about the optimizer. It just works. But it seems that these days many people need to be reminded why to use PL SQL.
So the next, we're sort of running time. We'll see if we can have any extra in. But the next question, it's mainly addressed for Andy, is Oracle's now released NoSQL products of its own. Is this saying that there are situations where NoSQL is more appropriate than the standard Oracle RDBMS?
I guess I already talked about this earlier, but yeah, there's clearly use cases for NoSQL databases, and there have been for 40 years, and there will continue to be so. And so for us, at Oracle, we want to have a complete family of data management offerings that span all use cases that customers want to use. And so it made perfect sense for us to take Berkeley DB, and just like Amazon, we added a distribution layer on top of it, and we have a very top-notch NoSQL product that we're investing in quite significantly, and we're actually going to move out to the cloud this year, where I think we'll have a lot of customers using our NoSQL engine there in the cloud use cases. And so, yeah, there's definitely a use case for NoSQL, and we want to have a complete family of data management products that solve all the use cases, and so, yeah.
Are there any quick examples of which cases somebody should be looking at more of a NoSQL solution than like the standard kernel?
Well, it's one of these things where relational databases can do everything. NoSQL does a small subset of what relational databases do. And so it's up to the developers to decide what they want to do. If they have a fairly complex application, and part of that application is simple and it could use a NoSQL database, well, in that case, you might as well just write the whole thing in Oracle SQL and be done with it, right? Why bother making your life more complex by trying to now integrate together multiple data stores and deal with security across multiple data stores? But if you have a simple application that doesn't really need integration with lots of other data stores, sure. Like the classical use case that started NoSQL at Amazon was, I've got my product catalog and people are browsing all my products. All I want to do is let people basically look up a product by name and find the price and information about the product. Great use case for NoSQL. User profiles are good use cases. Here's the user ID. Give me back all the information about the user that I can use to drive my front end. People are using it, again, like in fraud detection systems. You can do all the heavy lifting in a data warehouse to figure out people's credit scores and all kinds of other attributes. And then when they do the transaction, you can have all that all pre-computed, sitting in a NoSQL database and do quick credit checking, fraud detection checking. Those are some examples. There's lots of use cases.
Okay. Anybody else have any sound bites on that? Okay. So we'll go on to the next one if nobody wants to chip in on that. So if SQL is the best language for big data, why was there room in the market for Hadoop? How did Hadoop become so popular?
So let me try to take this one. Andy alluded on this a little bit before. The short answer here would be why Hadoop? It's because it's cheap and people think it's cool. Although, as Andy said, right, the coolness is starting to fade off a little bit, and whether it was ever as cool as Oracle Red Shoes is a different story. But now a little bit more serious. When we look at the question itself isn't very clearly defined, because it begs what is Hadoop and what is SQL, and what are these things that we compare with each other. As Andy said before, Hadoop has multiple parts, and some dealing with the persistence of data, and some others dealing with the attempts of processing data. And the same is actually true when we use the notation of SQL in that question, right? People probably, when this question comes up, automatically imply that when I talk about SQL, I'm talking about fixed, structured data that persists somewhere, somehow, on a physical device. And this is actually not true. When we talk about SQL, or at least how we see the world here, is SQL in that context, we talk about the processing of data where it's not necessarily relevant where the data is stored. So talking about SQL as a development language or data manipulation, data access language, it doesn't matter whether the data resides in fixed structures on data or whether the data is defined in a more loosely context, whether this is a JSON document or anything else, or whether the data is even stored outside the database. And I think that is where Hadoop comes into the picture looking forward, as Andy said, right? HDFS is definitely a capable, cool, distributed file system, right? And it's cheap, undoubtedly, right? Someone has to take care of it, someone has to manage the data. And it definitely makes life easier, to put data into any kind of persistence structure where there is no structure to begin with. That is similar to NoSQL, right? You just put it in, and it makes it easier just to potentially get data in. But at some point in time, the rubber hits the road and people want to do something with the data. And that is where some kind of structure comes into place as well. And this is where we actually want to combine these two worlds, and where we put a lot of effort into the development of SQL as the data processing languages, make it easy and efficient to work on any kind of structure. We started that actually back in the 9i days with the introduction of external tables, which was the very first step into making Oracle a data processing engine. And this is what we are consequently developing towards, and we have made big inroads here with the combination of data stored inside the database and data stored outside the database with Big Data SQL, where we're trying to optimize the processing for multiple different shades of data containers to work as efficiently and as scalable as possible with the data. So I think that is where we have to clearly say, when we look at what we are doing here from a SQL perspective, we're dealing first and foremost with the data processing, and then we are optimizing whatever lies behind there in the data persistence layer to make this as unified, as global, and as effective as possible.
Great, thanks. Any other sound bites on that?
Yep.
No. Steve? No.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to ask you a little bit. We have 2 more questions left, so this is the next last question. But what's the Oracle Development Advocate team doing to sort of bring SQL to the public, or cut through some of this misunderstanding? Like we talked about the Java programmers doing joins in Java, not realizing they can do it in the database. What are you guys up to?
So I'd say the Oracle Developer Advocates team is focused in 2 major areas. One is generally content generation, so moving away from white papers and PowerPoints to videos primarily, scripts, and so on. So I already mentioned Connor's video series on Keep It Simple SQL. We'll be issuing our first episode of Schema Wars in the next few months, so keep an eye out for that. It's our little riff on Star Wars for database developers. Hopefully it will be very entertaining and go viral. So one area is just providing better content to help developers ingest and make sense of our technology. The second is that we're looking at modernizing and integrating kind of a constellation of websites that we're currently offering to our development community that are just not connected up and delivering enough value, though they're delivering lots of value. What do I mean? AskTom is still one of the most popular technology sites for Oracle developers, and it's going to get better. LiveSQL. How many of you have used LiveSQL? Okay, so LiveSQL is a website. You can go to livesql.oracle.com where you can execute SQL and PL SQL on a 12.1 database. No need to install anything. You can play around with SQL. You can download and run scripts, so it's a script repository. And we'll be upgrading that in terms of the number of scripts, the ability to comment on them and like them and share them. PL SQL Challenge is a quiz platform that we'll be revamping and offering quizzes across SQL, PL SQL, and starting next month in Application Express. So we're looking at connecting up a lot of these different resources to really give you the better tools to solve your problems, and also for newcomers coming into our arena to be able to get their answers, their questions answered more quickly.
So, sort of on dovetailing that, so that sounds like a lot of that's for the Oracle community or people coming into the Oracle community. Are we doing anything for these